Hello, everybody, and welcome to our show today. I'm really excited you can join us. So today I have a really cool special guest talking about a really important topic, which really has to do with how to find and retain top talent. So a lot of you, if you don't know, it is ridiculously expensive to onboard, hire somebody. When you lose them, it can cost you considerably. So with us today is Roy Barker. Now, Roy has spent his career working with businesses of all types to improve their sales and marketing strategies. He believes that any company can improve their financial position through revenue optimization, expense management, managing employee turnover, and operational efficiencies. And for the last 19 years now, Roy has consulted with different companies, including senior living communities, to improve their resident services and optimize operation. He's proven to be instrumental in helping communities increase their occupancy by refining their sales processes, marketing strategy, marketing team development, and prospect seminars, amongst helping many other different types of businesses as well. So Roy has so many different levels of knowledge that I kind of had to pick one of his specialties and go with, and we'll jump in and get started. So Roy, thanks for joining me today. I'm excited you could be here.
Oh, wow. Thanks for that great introduction, Ty. I appreciate you having me as a guest.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you being on here. Like I said, it was hard to figure out which topic to even focus on because you've got such a wide array of expertise. So I'm sure we'll be diving into a bunch of different topics. But let's get started.
Okay.
How did you get to where you are now? How did you find your true passion?
Oh, wow. It was the road less traveled by most. When I was growing up, I lived in a rural area. So being a cowboy was really all I ever wanted to be. And I got lucky, went to work for AT&T pre-divestiture, and I went to night school for about 12 years, got my undergrad in finance. And so after I started doing some financial advising, my stepfather was in the business consulting with senior living operators. And we collaborated on, I really didn't collaborate. I did some of the financial and technical work for a book that he was writing. And then we just talked about it and decided, well, why didn't I come on and start helping with some of the financial operations? And that was back in 2000. That's where it started. Back in that day, caregivers were mainly the ones who started the communities. And then as it became a huge industry, now we have a lot of financial guys running the businesses. So I kind of transitioned over to doing a little more sales and marketing because that's where we're very weak. We used to be very transactional and trying to move that to relationship. 2007, I decided to go back and get my graduate degree in gerontology. And as I'm sitting there reading a book in this management class, they said that you could expect 300 to 500% turnover of employees in some of the higher care, higher acuity communities. And I mean, I'm like you, I just fell out of my chair and thought, how do you run a business when you're hiring, your employees over 3 times a year? Started doing a little research on it and found that there is actually a huge dollar cost associated with that. And that can be, I typically put it between $500 and $7,500 to turn over a $10 hour employee. And I've seen some estimates that it can run as high as 10,000. And then as you move up the chain to your managers, you become maybe about 120% top C-level executives, 2 to 250% of their salary. And then some tech workers can run up to 400% of their salary. So that's just the financial cost. But as a consumer, when I walk in a business and I have to deal with somebody new every time to tell my story to them, I become very uncomfortable. So I can imagine if your loved one was in a community and every time that you went to see them, you saw somebody different and you had to explain the intricacies of their wants and their needs every time. And it gets to be very frustrating. So I felt like that was a huge thing that needed to be addressed in our business. And it's been slow, but we're finally getting there. The unemployment rate being so low has really sparked people into taking a little bit more care of their employees too.
That's great.
Yeah.
And it's very, very true. Coming from the military, when you re-up is what we call it, when you basically
Right.
re-enlist, they give you really good sized bonuses based on the industry you're in. Like SEALs get $7,500, $100,000 plus just for enlisting because of the substantial
Wow.
cost it takes to be able
Right.
to do that, so the government really has
Right.
realized that a lot of people have. So in doing what you do, and here's kind of a different kind of question. So what have you found is your personal superpower? Like, what is it that you do that you've naturally found and discovered about yourself that you're like, wow, I'm really good at this along the way?
Oh gosh, I think listening to employees and trying to understand what is the culture at these businesses, and as being an employee for many many years, I understand both sides of that table, and so I think that that's the most important part. Is as managers, we tend to think that we know what's best for everybody, and one thing I try to talk to my groups about is let's do a lot of listening before we start changing things. Let's see what, because everything changes from different groups in a city to different cities to different parts of the United States. And so instead of enacting a great plan that none of these people like, well, why don't we try to enact things that they're going to like and enjoy and participate in to try to build that culture?
So, in doing what you do, what's one of the most surprising things you've discovered? One of the most shocking things that you discovered along the way?
Well, I was meeting with the CEO one day, and he happened to be taking a monthly update call from one of his communities. And the guy on the other end was so excited because he had hired 15 people this month. And I fell out of, once I picked myself up off the ground, I wrote a note to the CEO and I said, how do you even hire 15 people in one month? I mean, I don't have a lot of staff. I have one young lady that helps me with some marketing and some internet things, but when I have to hire for that position, it takes weeks, and that's a part-time position. So you're telling me you hired 15 people that are going to take care of somebody else's loved one in one month, and I didn't understand it. And basically, it's just reactive. There are employees that call off, or worse, no calls, no shows. And so it's very reactive. We have to put people in these communities to help. And so I kind of laughed that the old test is, you've got a pulse and you liked your grandmother, so you're hired. And that was kind of the way it was. And it's kind of funny and it's kind of not, because what I tried to explain is I love my grandmother and I took care of her, and that was good because I grew up with her. But taking care of somebody else's grandmother would be a huge stretch for me, and I don't think I would be good at that. And so I don't think people understand how hard it is at that direct care level. It is a backbreaking tough, and it's tough emotional. They get attached to these residents and they see them go, their health go downhill, so it can take an emotional toll on them too.
So, what do you find in your expertise is the common reasons that people typically leave an organization?
Typically they leave because of manager. Either they're like I said, a misfit for the job from the very beginning, or they have a poor manager. And that's a big misconception now, that people leave for money, and they do if it's a big chunk, but people usually won't walk across the street for another dime an hour. Now, as your employee, that's what I'm going to tell you, because that's the least path of resistance for me. And if I need you to rehire me, I don't have to say, you know what, I don't like you, I don't like your company, and that's why I'm leaving. It's easier to say, well, it's money, but typically it's managers. And so that's the thing, is if you have multiple managers at a workplace, not only do we look at what is the overall turnover in this business, but you have to drill down to the management level as well. Is there a hot spot within this group? And sometimes it's job related, just like direct care. I mean, I couldn't go into a community and blame the direct care manager for his high turnover without first investigating, are we hiring the correct people? So
Sure.
you just can't jump to conclusions.
Now, in your research, and you talked about this a few minutes ago, what do you find is the real cost to be able to have that loss and be able to turn over an employee?
The dollar cost.
Yeah, I mean, do you have an
Yeah.
idea? Is it different based on industry? I mean, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it can be a little different based on industry and location, but typically I would not say you could do it for less than probably $3,000. So that would be the minimum that it would cost somebody, because you have to think about all the components involved in that. If somebody just leaves and you have an open position, you have overtime you have to pay to cover that job. You have a hiring manager that has to develop the ad and post the ad. You have to do the interview. So there is a lot of time. If you do it right, let me say this. If you just put an Indeed ad out there, hire the first person that comes in, you're not going to have a lot of cost involved. But if to hire that right person, yeah. And then the other thing about that is, you can hire on the cheap the first person that walks in, and you're just going to have a revolving door. So after a month or two, you're going to end up being in the same position if you would have just spent the money to hire quality
Sure.
to begin with.
Well, what do you find is some of the best ways to retain somebody and get them to be happy where they are, where you don't lose them?
Well, it's company culture, and I mean this starts from the beginning. I think it even starts pre-hire. Is what I advise people to do is make connections. This internet is a fabulous thing to reach out on LinkedIn, and so I may have all these connections, and I'm able to watch them. What do they post? What is their attitude? We can have some conversations back and forth, so that if I have an opening, I have maybe a group of 5 people already that I'm thinking, well, why don't I just pulse them and see if they're looking for a job, because I have some knowledge of them. It's not starting cold. And then the other thing is screening. I think you have to do a very good job of screening even before you get to the interview process. And there's a lot of great services that provide not only questions for the applicant, but also some kind of follow-up questions based on their answers for the interviewer. So it all starts pre-hire. But when we come on, we have to onboard. And I don't mean sitting down at the desk Monday morning at 8 o'clock and just unloading everything about your company and the job on them. It takes time. It's going to take time for them to absorb this. And the other thing actually too is you need to realize these people are coming. Once you make the hire, you need to realize these people are coming to work. You would be surprised at how many times I hear that I showed up and nobody knew I was coming. The desk wasn't ready. I didn't have access to get in. I don't have computer access. So it's very important to get out in front and have all of that ready so they feel like they're needed and wanted, because that can start the relationship off on a totally bad foot. And then the other thing I like to do is, once we go through this onboarding, is assign a mentor, because if I may have a job doing the same thing at another company, but there's always going to be intricacies from one company to the next. So instead of me having to come to you, my boss, and say, oh my gosh, I don't know about this, or I'm unsure, if you assign a peer mentor that they can go to, it makes that question and answer session much more easier, and they feel they feel mentored. They feel like somebody's trying to help them succeed.
Yeah, it's great advice.
Yeah. Yeah. And
When
then
you're
I'll just say just one, a couple other things on the back end is the company culture, recognizing, when we talk about recognition, a lot of companies like, oh, we can't afford it. And I say, well, I'm not talking about a ticker tape parade every time somebody shows up for work on time, but what about a cupcake? What about a pat on the back? As a boss, we don't hesitate to get up, open our door, and go out and find somebody who has done something that we need changed or we need them to do different. Why can't, when we're walking down the halls of our company, pat them on the back and say, Joe, thanks for being here and doing a great job? That it's the simple things. I promise that.
That's interesting. Great advice.
Yeah.
What about precursors, kind of things? I found that when things blow up, it usually if you look back in hindsight's 2020, you see things that led up to that event. What are the first indicators that you think are out there that an employee isn't happy?
Well, I think that they will become disconnected. They won't be engaged in their job. You might even walk by and find them out there on the internet surfing for jobs. I think the latest number I saw is that like 60 to 70% of people are passively looking. That doesn't mean they're actively searching, but if somebody came to them, that they would be interested. So I think that is part of the engagement. What, are they showing up on time? Do they start missing Mondays and Fridays? Those are big indicators. Are they late on projects? Are they not getting their work done on time? Just all of those things. And you can just tell too by the attitude. Do they appear happy? Are they smiling? Are they glad to be there? Are they having a personal problem? That's the other thing about communication is key, because I need to talk to you to find out what's going on. Is this something that we can solve together? Do you just not like this job? Or are you going through a divorce? You having trouble with children? Can we adjust your schedule to help you out through troubled time? Sometimes it's transportation. My car broke down. I just can't get to work, and I don't live by a bus line. And so instead of me calling you, because I know you're going to fire me, so instead of me calling you, I just don't show up. Where if we can open these lines of communication where the employees really talk to each other and to the managers, you can get to the bottom of whatever's going on.
Yeah, that's a strat philosophy I live by, is that there's rarely ever a problem that communication can't solve.
You're correct.
What
And
about
that's the
feedback?
problem is we're all so busy in our day-to-day jobs that we just don't take the time to interact like we should.
How do you set that up? I mean, what's the best way to set up a feedback loop where somebody can tell you if they're not happy openly, where it's easier to kind of figure those things out early on?
Well, I think you have to have a whole a lot of methodologies for that. Number one, the open door policy. When I was at AT&T, my people knew that they could come talk to me anytime. But I told them, leave me a note underneath the desk or slip one in at night, send me a postcard, whatever you have to do to get the message I want to hear. I'm not telling you I can change everything, especially in a big company, but I'm willing to listen and to work with you to see what we can do to resolve this.
Yeah, and that makes a ton of sense. Keep the doors open. Make sure they have an open line of communication with you or whoever their senior manager is. What do you do to
Right,
keep them
right. One
engaged?
thing
What do you do?
that
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, no. I was just going to say, that part of this too is interacting outside of business hours. And I don't mean that we have to be all best friends and go to the ball games together. But one thing I used to do, I would have cookouts at the office at lunch, have all my guys come back in and get a hamburger or something like that. And then, maybe once every quarter, we might have an event at my house or somewhere off site, just another gathering where people could come out and be together without being on the clock. And so I think, developing those kinds of openness and relationships, because when they're at your house, maybe having a beer, they might be more apt to say something than they would when they're on the clock.
Sure.
Yeah.
What are some other things, and you've touched on some with like the cupcakes, or just some sort of appreciation? What are some other things you do to keep employees engaged and happy?
Well, you can set up one-on-one meetings with them, and they don't have to be long. Sometimes it's just a debrief. Hey, how's it going? What's up in your world? Let's don't wait till there is a problem. Let's try to stay on top of that. The biggest thing I think is the pattern is getting out of the office, not hiding behind the office door and not hiding behind email. Get out and talk to people. And like I said, let's pat them on the back. We don't have any problem dishing out some criticism when things go wrong or we need things changed, but we should also be out there to be saying, we appreciate you. I mean, this company would not run without you. And it's a blessing to have you here. So we need to really communicate that throughout the entire year. And then appraisals, instead of waiting all year long and then really dinging somebody on an appraisal, have these talks as you go through the year. If there's things that need to be corrected or that you'd like to see, so there's no surprises, because that can really demoralize somebody as they think they're doing a great job and everything is fine, and then it comes the end of the year and they get dinged on an appraisal, they don't get a raise, and then they feel like they're in jeopardy, and it just creates a whole host of emotions that are totally unnecessary. And I hate to say it, but it all gets back to communication, and that's just being open and honest and trying to talk with each other.
That's great advice. And speaking of those appraisals, or what we often call reviews, how often do you think we do those then? How often do you recommend?
Well, a lot of companies set that, but I think that if you just have a quarterly meeting with everybody, and you can have some loose conversations with things and take notes, and just as long as it's documented well, it's better, because if they, and instead of letting somebody slide way off the track, you might be able to catch them early in the process and get them righted back on the track, or see what's going on. It could be a process change. We can't always put the blame on the employee. Maybe they interface with somebody in another department who turned over, and that interface isn't going well, and it's reflecting bad on our guy, but he's trying to work it out, not say anything. So those are all things that we can figure out. Now, the official documented appraisal once a year is good, but I think that we need to be out there talking to people at least once a quarter on those issues. But we need to have that weekly, monthly interaction with them, so they know that we're a presence.
When it comes to pay, and for example, considering raises, when I was in the military, it was pretty set. You get about 5% raise every year. What do you do? How do you base raises consideration, and is that kind of based on these appraisal reviews as well?
Most of the time they are, especially once you get into bigger companies, they'll have, top 10% at 5 and then the middle at 3 or however they structure it. So that's why it's important not to let things go too long. But if you're in a smaller company, then, you might have the freedom to, if you've got a guy who's the super performer, who's really doing good for your business, you might have an opportunity to give them a little bit more. But you do have to be careful with the discrepancies of pay with people at the same levels, because they do talk. So it's a fine line that you have to walk, but you do want to retain the talent. And I guess my opinion is, if you've got somebody that's kind of lagging, you need to make a decision on them pretty quick. If they're not going to be able to keep up and be up, then maybe they either need to find another job in the company, or maybe they need to find another job, period. Because when we try to strive reduce turnover, 0 is not our number, and it's hard to say where that is. But typically in the teens, and maybe in like in the senior living industry, the high teens, low 20s is where I would like to be, because you're going to have deaths, you're going to have people who move because of spouses, and then you're actually going to have employees that just don't need to be working there, that are going to have to leave.
Well, what are some aspects of culture? And you've touched upon culture. What are some aspects of culture that you think an organization can create where people don't want to leave, where people do want to stay?
Well, you need to challenge them, and here again, it gets back to communication, listening to what they want. Maybe you assign special projects to different people to help you out if the money or promotion is not available. But there's all kinds of things. Having the ice cream socials, getting people away from their desk, away from their work, to engage with each other, with you. Uh, just the recognition in front of their peers that Joe is doing an awesome job. We just want to take a minute and say thanks for your service. It's like I said, it's really nothing expensive or time consuming. It's just the very small recognition that they're important.
And what about, I mean, do you think that non-competes, employee contracts, do you think these are at all useful with retaining employees, or the things that organizations should consider?
Oh, that's a tough question. If you have proprietary information, of course, you may have, a non-compete if somebody's in sales in your area. But my understanding of those is they're getting harder and harder to enforce. And then also, as the employee, you feel like, well, why are they trying to hamstring me so I have to stay here? So I guess it kind of gets back to, maybe that's more reactive, is that if we're proactive and we do all the things that we need to do to keep them there and keep them happy and engaged, then we don't have to worry about that on the back end. But they are necessary, yes.
Yeah, and I find the same way as non-competes as I do any kind of contract with companies. Like, if I was your customer or employee, if I don't want to be here, it's probably not in your best interest to force me to stay. So
Exactly.
I completely relate to that. You
Right.
mentioned this, so do you recommend in trying a problem employee in another position, or does it depend on the problems you're having?
Yeah, it depends on the problems that we're having. If somebody is having trouble interfacing with customers, if they're customer facing and something is going on in their life where they're just not being as friendly and as helpful as we need, if there's a back office position where there's something that they can do, then yeah, I would recommend trying to find them a position to, if they're a good worker. But sometimes, you know, uh, what I've been told and what I believe is that attitudes are like colds. And so if you have a bad attitude in your office, somebody else is going to catch that. So you have to be careful what you put out there.
Well, what do you think? And you mentioned this earlier, that it starts in the beginning. What are some things you can do to attract the best talent early on?
Well, like in the senior living industry, two of our larger employee groups are in the nursing, the direct care field, and then also in dietary. So one thing I recommend is, like, for the HR, for the recruiter, to get out, make connections at culinary schools to try to find out, the instructors can tell them who are some of the best prospects that they have coming up. Maybe they get first shot at them, but they go out and talk to them. And same way with the nursing schools and with the CNA type schools, go out, present to them, find out who are the best candidates. And there are some companies that have even started some of their own training programs, and that way they can identify those top performers right out of school and or right out of their training, pick them up, and then let the rest go, find other jobs.
What about during the interview process? What are things that you think are kind of essential? Because, everybody's faking it during interviews, right? So
Right.
how do you get past that? I mean, what kind of things have you found really help you get to the heart of who somebody is to see if they are a good cultural fit for the organization?
Yeah, that's where the screening services really help, because what they can do is they can ask questions in such a way, and they can ask it in different ways repeatedly to try to see if the answers are consistent, and then they can give you a lot of good follow-up questions in an interview. But I think it's just being thorough, it's reading body language, and it's doing research. I hired a young lady. I was searching for somebody, interviewed 5 candidates, found the one that I wanted, and I was just fixing to extend her an offer when another person called me, kind of desperate, said, I just saw that you were looking for somebody. Can you please see me? And this was like at Friday at 5:00. And so we ended up meeting at a coffee shop like at 7:00 on a Friday night to give her a chance. And she was great. I was like, when I walked away from there, I thought, wow, I'm glad this all happened, because she's going to be the best fit. But I went home, started doing a little bit of research on the internet, and found some things that were less than flattering. And so it really saved me from making a really disastrous hire. And what I found out was that she had an awesome resume. And when you look at her Facebook profile, she had another awesome resume that just happened to be different than the one that I got. And then if you looked at her LinkedIn account, there was actually a third one that was different than the other two. So a lot of inconsistencies.
Yeah.
And I think a good hiring manager, after you've been through this for a while, and I'm not the best, believe me, but you just can start to read people. You can look and ask questions about, well, what did you do? What were the tools that you use? The other thing is, if they've been in the business, well, have you used this tool before, to see if they have and if they understand what that is.
I think it's very effective, and social media is so telling. Like you said, to the question, you could fake an interview, but you can't fake social. And I, like you, rule out a lot of people from what I see on social, and am astonished at the stuff they put out on social. It's just so crazy. So, anybody hiring, it's a great resource. And I always do that. And what's interesting now, I've realized, is that I do it now before I even schedule the pre-interviews, because I'm doing pre-interviews and on their social, and I found things that would automatically exclude them before we even get to the pre-interview. So I found it's just an easy way to even rule people out before you even get to that point.
Exactly.
What about like personality profiles? And you mentioned, I don't know if that's what you just talked about or not, you referred to it as something different. But do you believe in personality assessments, these kind of tests? Do you think it's good for people to go through these before you consider hiring them?
I think that there are some levels of management and some jobs that they can be helpful on. I've seen a few out there that I've taken that, they were right on. And so I guess what it would do is maybe help you find where they fit best in your organization, or will they work best under your management style. So there can give you some insight. But the ones I've seen were pretty expensive. So I would say probably, that would be for higher level managers who are going to be, controlling larger divisions of people.
Sure. Makes sense.
Yeah.
What about, and there are some, I think, out there that are more affordable. I'm not sure which the one that we use, but it's interesting because what we found is that a lot of our problem team members, we don't have a lot, but the few that we've had all kind of fit into certain personality groups. So it's interesting. And we've also found that it does sometimes help just to link some people together, to make sure that they're a good fit. But like you said, they can get really expensive, even thousands of dollars.
Right.
a lot of the ones that are out there. We talk about culture. We've talked about it, and, it's almost become a buzzword that's out there so much. But how do you really hire somebody to make sure that they are a good cultural fit for the organization?
Well, I think that just gets back to, it's you're seeing these people for 30 minutes, maybe an hour, but what I would recommend is, you have the multi-step, and again, this depends on the job, then the position and the size of the company. It depends on a lot of things, but what I recommend is, have the gatekeeper, the hiring manager, or the HR guy be the first one. They come through and they pass that. Have a peer review, because the workers will pick up on who they want to work with and who they don't want to work with. So maybe have a panel of 2 to 3 people who are in that same job to also set, like a second or third interview.
What about onboarding and training? What's one of the best processes that you've seen to be effective in that area of bringing somebody in and then training them?
Well, I think the first thing is being ready to go. You meeting them at the door, at their desk, you have their IDs, you have all their logins, you have everything, so they could sit down and be productive from the very first minute they walk in. They don't have to, call or find out where am I supposed to set and go through all that. You have all that set up for them. And then on the onboarding, I think that it's good to do that maybe over a week. Just depends on the company size, but don't try to cram all that information down their throat at one time. Start out slow, let them get a little bit day one, let them assign them their mentor. Maybe they can shadow them or walk around with them, sit at their desk, see how things work within this company, the new company that they're at, and then just kind of let it be natural. But don't just, I've seen these guys that they have, 6 3-ring binders, and they set them on the desk and say, here, sit here and read this all day long, and you don't retain that. It's kind of a waste of time.
Roy, I've enjoyed having you on. Let me ask you this. What's one thing that you think that entrepreneurs out there should be doing? Maybe it's on the topic of retention and hiring. Maybe it's a different topic. But what's one thing that you see that entrepreneurs should be doing and that they're not doing now?
Well, I think it's just the hiring of talent. I think uh, what I see is that we don't interact a lot personally. It's an email, it's a voicemail. There's not that personal contact. And so, especially in the realm of employees, is pick up the phone, give them a call. And kind of in the sales portion, I think it's basically the same message: is be have good follow up. We want to reach out, talk to people. Don't just send an email. Are you ready yet? Are you ready to buy yet? I'm ready for you to buy. Come on, let's do this. If you on the sales side, if you have good communication and you really ask some good questions in the beginning, you'll have thoughtful follow up that you can use instead of the old, hey, I'm circling back now. And so one thing, a lady pointed this out to me a few months ago with the sales and with the employee retention, is she's like, wow, you're all about communication and relationships. And I think that's the thing, is it gets down to that, building relationships and having quality communication. Texting and emailing are great in some instances, but it's not like reaching out and getting somebody on the telephone or meeting them in person.
Listen, I've enjoyed having you on the show. As we wrap up, I think I just have one last question. What's an action item? What's something that everybody listening today can walk away with, and something they can take action on and do to improve their ability or possibility or probability, I should say, of either bringing somebody in, bringing in the right kind of talent, or retaining them?
I think it's ask questions. Don't always think that you have the answer, or come up, in your laboratory, come up with this plan that you think is going to work. Get out, talk to your people, ask them questions. What do they want? What's going to make them happy? And then base plans around that communication.
Listen, great advice. Where's everybody listening? Where can they go? Because we have limited time, and I'm sure there's a lot more that everybody would like to get information-wise from you. So where can they go to talk to you more, to schedule time with you, to get more information?
Well, they can take a look at roybarker.com, or I would love for them to reach out. I'd be glad to set up some individual consultations at roy@roybarker.com.
Okay. So Roy at roybarker.com, and I will go ahead and put that on the actual resources page, and I'll put roybarker.com. So everybody listening, everybody watching,
Okay.
make sure that you go out, check out roybarker.com. You can also email Roy directly, roy@roybarker.com, and set up a consultation so we can talk to you a little bit more. It is considerably more expensive to mess this up and to go about and not hire the right people or focus to keep the people in the organization that are already there. So schedule a consultation with Roy. See maybe what he can do to help give you some advice on for your industry, for your business, for you specifically, on ways to attract the right people into your organization and on keeping them. So Roy, again, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. I really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much, Ty. I appreciate it. It's been great.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Make sure you visit roybarker.com. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.